Mishnah, we see, going back in page number 2, on page 3, on unit 2, page 3, we have the Mishnah at the bottom of the page where we have the big headline of Rabban Gamliel's story. Over there, it says there in the Shabbat of Kuf Kaf Bet, there's the story towards the end of the line. Maseh Rabban Gamliel uzkenim shebeim b'sfina v'asan ochli kevesh lired bo v'yerdu bo Rabban Gamliel uzkenim. So Rabban Gamliel and his crew of rabbis all disembarked on this ramp that the Goy erected for them. And the question is, why was this okay? Presumably, the Braita says, as we see in the next Braita, the following paragraph, if the Goy is acquainted with the Jew, so he's not allowed to so the Jew isn't allowed to enjoy and to benefit from the Melacha that was done. The Gemara assumes Rabban Gamliel is a Nasi, he's a Chashav Yid, he's not only a big rabbi, he's also an important political figure. So presumably all Goyim were aware of his presence. They knew he was around. So why was Rabban Gamliel allowed to benefit from this ramp, to use this ramp? So the Gemara, right at the beginning of the next page, page number 4, quotes two Morenu who resolve this contradiction. Towards the end of the line, Amar Abaye shelo b'fanav hava, Rava Amar afilu te'en b'fanav ner le'echad ner le'me'ah. We'll start from Rava because Rava was discussed in the previous year already. Rava says that what's good for one is good for many. In a Melacha, that's the nature of which can benefit many as well as it benefits the single person, all the others can also benefit, are allowed to benefit from it as well. Now the Gemara clarified, and we discussed this in the previous year, it doesn't mean that any time a Goy does a Melacha that can benefit many people, anyone's allowed to benefit. We said last time, we see in the Mishnah, this can't be true. For example, turning the light on in this Beit Midrash, right? Let's say the Goy comes and turns the light on. Are now all Jews allowed to benefit because the light, that's the Gemara's example, it's light that helps one can help many, right? Is that correct? Are all Jews allowed to benefit from it? From the light? So that can't be true because that's one of the 3 examples in the Mishnah. The Mishnah, at the beginning, if you want to have a look at page number 1, right at the beginning, the first example the Mishnah brings, if the candle, in this case, right, was lit for Jews' benefit, so a Jew isn't allowed to use it. So we worked this out last year. I'm not going to go too deeply into it again. The rule seems to be that it depends on who the central beneficiaries are supposed to be. If Goyim are supposed to benefit from it, so Jews are also allowed to, even if he's aware that also Jews will be using it. The example the Gemara gives is the example of a Beit Merchatz, of a bathhouse, maybe you'd say nowadays it'd be a pool. The guy warms up the pool on Shabbos. Who's he warming the pool up for? If most of the customers are Jews, so he's warming it up for the Jews. Now, there happen to be some Goyim customers, but still, he's warming it up for the Jews. As opposed to if most of the customers are Goyim, so he's warming up for the Goyim, fully aware that also Jews will come. But then you'd be allowed to come. Then the Jews would be allowed to visit right after Shabbat. Would be allowed to go to the pool right after Shabbat. Wouldn't have to wait for the time it would take him to warm the pool up. So that's Rava. Now we go back to Abaye. So any time we have a machloket in Shas between Abaye and Rava, who do we hold like? Halacha? We hold generally like Rava, except for the 6 cases, possibly 7 cases, depends on the Tosfot there, but we're not going to get into that right now. This is not one of them, presumably. Except, if we read this carefully, Rava doesn't say that Abaye is wrong. Rava says, Afilu tema b'fanav ner le'echad ner le'me'ah, meaning, even if it was in his presence, even if the Jew is present, still there's a distinction. So the Rashba says, based on this wording, Rashba you can see, on page 7. The Rashba says, Rava isn't arguing with Abaye. He's not saying Abaye is wrong. He's just saying, despite that, he's just saying I can say a better answer. You're right that if the Jew is not present, the Jew is allowed to benefit from the Melacha. But even if the Jew is present, in this case he'd be allowed to benefit from the Melacha anyway. That's what Rava is saying. Therefore, since there's no argument in Abaye and Rava, so we accept Rava's resolution. Now, on the other hand, the Rambam doesn't seem to quote Abaye. The question is, does this mean that we don't hold like Abaye? Before we can answer that question properly, we have to go deeper into what did Abaye say exactly and how that fits into the rest of the sugya. Okay? So like this. Let's do a quick recap that's presented to you on page 8. We have a Mishnah, a Braita, and a Abaye. Bottom of page 8, we have the Gemara from Daf Kuf Kaf Bet. It's the Mishnah, the Braita, and Abaye, and I want us to notice what does each of them focus on. So the Mishnah says, what's the Mishnah's distinction in each of the cases? I only brought the third one here because we read the Mishnah several times throughout the pages. But what's the distinction? What does the question of whether the Jews are allowed to benefit from the Goy's Melacha depend on what?
Bishvil Yisrael, no Bishvil Yisrael.
Bishvil Yisrael. What is Bishvil Yisrael? Your own words. For his benefit, right? For his benefit. Right? Okay. Then the Braita differentiates between Tanur Banan. The differentiation there is between what and what?
Acquainted or not?
Acquainted or not acquainted, right? Makilo or lo makilo, right?
No, but it seems to be predicated on whether it was, Bishvil Yisrael or not Bishvil Yisrael.
Okay, so we're going to go back to that. But first, before you're already suggesting an answer, it's a good answer. We're going to get back to it. But first, I just want us to see that there is a discrepancy here between these three. So the first again is the Mishnah, depends on whether it's for his benefit, right? Then you have the Braita, depends on whether he's familiar with the Jew, whether they're acquainted. Then you have Abaye. What's Abaye's distinction? Befanav, and what is that? Remember it?
He sees him. He's got
Okay, so
presence.
So right, the simplest translation is presence, right? But you added another word for a reason, right? What did you say before that? What? You first said something else.
Said he's there, but that's not you.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you said something else. So, sorry. I just need to bog down on that point. What is the relationship between these three? And how far and how extreme are we going to take them? I'll explain what I mean. Let's say I have a guy in, New York, who I'm friendly with. And he has a birthday on Shabbos. So I stay at someone in New York, and I show up in the middle of Shabbos. Now, are we acquainted? Yes. Am I allowed to benefit from the melachot he did until that point?
Yes.
Well, but we are acquainted. What
Philip's
Philip's saying goes against the bride. The bride says depends on whether we're acquainted or not. No?
Abaye seems to say that if the guy just happens to be around, meaning if I know some non-Jew and and we happen to know each other, and he decides to cut some flowers, for Shabbat, just for his family. If I'm not there, chances are he's not going to cut flowers for me. According to Abaye, if he cuts flowers and brings them to me, that, and I'm just not around, that seems to be okay. But if I happen to be right there,
right. So I want to take both extremes. What happens if I told him the day before, I'm going to come over to your house at 4 o'clock. I expect some scrambled eggs.
No, that's
the problem of Bishvil Yisrael.
So it's definitely Bishvil Yisrael, even though I'm not present, right?
That's a totally different case.
And it seems like
I know it's a different case. That's what makes it
no.
interesting.
What I mean though is that it's that's not the
right. No, but I want to take the three definitions that we're given here. We generally try to take the Mishnah and Braita's definitions very seriously, and also I'm trying to take each of them to their logical extreme. What happens if I tell the guy, if Rabban Gamliel had told the guy, I'm going to be in my cabin, we're going to reach the shore at 3 o'clock, and I'm going to sit in my cabin until I know that the ramp is up, and So the guy goes at 2 o'clock and starts working on this ramp, right?
Yeah.
So it's definitely done for his benefit.
Exactly.
Presumably they're also acquainted, but he wasn't present. Is that what Abai means?
He also didn't ask.
No,
No.
it's believed.
So
No,
presumably it
because-
sounds like that's what Abai means, no?
No, it seems
Okay.
like they're all built one on top of the other. The Breita itself includes both definitions. Breita itself says if it's Bishvil Yisrael, it's not allowed, in any case. If it's not Bishvil Yisrael,
Right.
then it depends if he knows him or doesn't know him. Ostensibly it wasn't Bishvil Yisrael, but if he knows him, then we still have a chashash that it was for him, let's say. And then Abaye says, okay, well, one way to figure out if it was for him or not for him, in the case that it was, in the case
Was
that
the presence.
he knows him,
Right.
is let's figure out if he
So
was the
even
friend
if he knows, even if he's acquainted, the question is, was he there?
yeah.
Was he present?
What difference does it make for a buyer? How does his answer help us in the least?
Wait, the Gemara's
The buyer's answer in that particular
Explain.
thing, in that explain. It doesn't. What is the purpose of this whole thing of benefiting from the goy? Is what happens to me, how I feel. I don't care how the goy feels. So, what's the difference if I'm there or if I'm not there? I mean, how does a buyer actually give an answer to the problem?
okay. That's
If you're
The Jew say sticks around behind the wall for a little while. How does that change what we're trying to get him to do?
Because if you're there, it's clear that maybe you can claim that his intention was also to had in mind that you're going to be using his melacha. If you weren't there,
Yeah,
you had no idea 1 second later you're going to turn the corner and walk over the bridge.
I don't care what the goy feels that he's doing it for me or not for me. The question is what it is for me.
No, it's
The
important.
goy-
okay. So
the
that's,
goy-
that's a very important. That's a very important point. I meant to reach it after we see a bit more, but let's open that up now since Danny opened it up already.
No, it's important, but
Why is the Jew's presence important? Let's remind ourselves. We discussed in the last year about the reasoning behind this prohibition. Right? We said that ultimately the goal is that Jews will not, since we're not allowed to request, as we learned at the beginning, since Jews are not allowed to request the melacha to be done, so we're not allowed to benefit from the melacha either, because once I know I can benefit from the melacha, I can always request the melacha. Right? And then I'll be tempted to request the melacha. We saw that in Rashi Tosfot, the question is which one is the defining parameter and which one's not. That we saw 2 shiurim ago. You could watch the video, whoever missed that. But ultimately that's the goal. So Danny's saying, based on that, why do I care what the goy thinks? The point is, what is the Jew thinking? The Jew is thinking, I could benefit from this melacha. If he didn't build the ramp yet, I'll say, come on, let's go. Do this thing, right? Presumably, that's the issue. That's what we should have in mind. So why is presence such a relevant factor? But now, before we answer that question, I think it is important to go back to what Yaakov pointed out, which is the way these different aspects, how these different definitions, the different parameters, how they're actually kind of built on each other. First and foremost, depends on whether it's done for the Jew. Now, the bride itself doesn't mention only makila; it mentions also whether it's done on the Jew's behalf. Right? First of all, if it's done on your behalf, game's over. Now, let's say it wasn't done on your behalf, but he's acquainted with you. It's still a problem. Why?
Still a degree of
You might be
lesser
more
degree
sick.
of familiarity, but it's still there.
You might be more sick. He might be more sick for you. He's a good guy. He might be more sick. That's the thing about the cattle feed and all that type of stuff.
Right, exactly so. That is when we say, as Yaakov said before too, right? That if it's explicitly done on your behalf, that's one thing. Let's say he's not explicitly doing it on your behalf, but he is aware of your existence. He's acquainted. You are your friends. He knows you're there.
1 second. Aware of your existence and acquainted are 2 different things.
Okay, I accept that. So I'll take it back. To the previous point. If I showed up,
I think that's exactly the difference between a buyer and the refusal. A buyer is saying you just have to be there. Nothing to do with acquainted. It's kind of a step further. And then once you need to be acquainted, and once no, acquainted doesn't matter. If you're actually there, it's even that's enough.
so I think Abaye and the Breita actually take two different paths. There are a few. In other words, the fundamental point is it done on your behalf or not? Now, the next, would we take one step before that and say, okay, fine, let's say I don't know that it was explicitly done for your benefit, but you are acquainted with you, but you are your friends, right? So maybe it wasn't explicitly done for you, but maybe it was just kind of had you in mind anyway. Or you're aware enough of the benefit that you could gain from his Melacha that he will do it on your behalf, or you'll be tempted to ask him to add just a bit more. And I think Abai is saying the same thing. Another just a moment. I think Abai is saying the same thing. Another relevant parameter is if you're present. Let's say the guy's never met you in his life, but you're there, and he knows. Okay, there's going to be another math to feed. Another person's going to want to read here. There's another, right? So you're not acquainted, fine, but we do things for people also when we're not acquainted with them. So if something is explicitly done for someone's behalf, that's the basic Isur. But then we see from the bright hand, from Abai, we take one step beyond that and say, well, even if you're not acquainted, but if he's aware of your existence, because you're acquainted, because you're friends, because you're familiar with him, or because you're present, so he understands there's going to be a need here. So that I think those two sit on the same concept of how aware is the guy. We're going to see this now in the Achronim in a moment, but let's question first.
Yeah, so the story of the Mishnah is that Rabban Gamliel and the Zikanim are on a boat.
Yes.
And they need to go down.
Yes.
I mean, the first question is why are they even on a boat in Shabbos? But
okay,
it's not
we're going to get to that in Shir 12. In Shir 12 we'll discuss that issue.
Like, I mean, the brother just says it is obvious that the guy knows him. Because they're on the boat together, so clearly he knows him. But he sees Rabban Gamliel and the Zikanim like coming down. Doesn't mention anything else about Nocharim, like other people trying to get out the boat.
You're asking but before we ask that question, I mean, there are 2 points that have to be pointed out here. One is, the Rashba says that Rabban Gamliel that the guy wasn't on the boat with Rabban Gamliel. We saw that in the previous year.
Okay.
Sorry. But that's just a side point. Again, I don't think that's the fundamental point. Let's ask the more basic question, which is, what is Abai on the practical level? How do you understand what Abai was saying? Abai said, "Shelo b'fanav hava." What does that mean on the practical?
It means that it's not in.
Where was he?
It's not in his mindset. Like it's more. It's not.
Oh, even before that, you're talking about on the principle level. I'm asking practically, just technically. Where were they? When Abai says it wasn't done in his presence, what does that mean?
Inside the boat.
Meaning they could have been on the boat and the guy could have been down somewhere else and putting the. So they weren't actually in their presence. Like they could have been in a different room. They could have been they could have been on the boat and the guy could have been off the boat and he's putting this ramp up anyway.
Okay, so I think that
Kili wasn't there.
So I think there are 2 ways of reading it. I was debating about this. I think there are 2 ways of reading it. One is that the guy knew that the ship is coming in. He had no idea he was on the ship. Rabban Gamliel wasn't present while it's not that the ship reached the shore and then they say, oh, we need to disembark. Oh, let's see who's that. Right, let's start putting the ramp up. He's just started putting the ramp up because he knew the boat's going to be here in an hour, or he saw it on the horizon or whatever. So it wasn't done in his presence. Just wasn't aware of his existence at all. Now, even if the guy was on the boat with him, which is the other teretz of the Rashba we saw in the previous year, I understood that the assumption the Gemara had was that everyone was standing around on deck waiting to disembark, and the question was, wait, so the guy's putting it up, and he sees, I better rush because there's a nasi over here, there's an important, I want to do a good job. And then the Gemara says, no, he was in the cabin. In other words, he didn't show that he was interested in disembarking at all. Just he wasn't there. Everyone was waiting to get off the boat, and he stayed in his cabin. Then they said that. Then his Talmidim said, "There's a ramp." He said, "Oh, great," and he disembarked. That's how I understood. And then the guy was aware of Rabban Gamliel's existence. That's the Gemara's assumption, right? Because the Gemara says, "Ha Rabban Gamliel makiro hava," right? You can't argue with that. It's inarguable that he was aware of Rabban Gamliel's existence as a figure. Was he aware of his existence on the boat? That's not so clear. So these are, I think, 2 alternative ways, just answering first of all, on the technical level, I think it's important to work out before we reach the more fundamental level. either the guy was not aware of his existence at all, or because he was on shore and Rabban Gamliel was in the boat, and then the Gemara says, even if you know someone, then if you read the Gemara like that, it means the following: even if I'm acquainted with someone, even if the guy is acquainted with someone, even if he's my friend, if he's not aware of my need on any level, it's not a problem, right? You'd think that you're not allowed to enjoy anything that a guy who's your friend has made on Shabbos, based on the bracket. It says Makila Asul, right? Abai says, no, it depends on whether you're present, and when you say present, I don't mean the technical presence, I mean the fundamental presence of, am I aware of your need on any level? You're present at the time, meaning maybe we're friends, maybe he's just an important political figure, so I'm aware of him, right? But I'm aware of his existence, and yet, if he's not present, he's not on my mind. Let's see some of what the poskim and Achron did with this, based on that idea. So the Magid Mishnah says, right at the top of the next page, in the English pages, page 9, בוודאי אפילו במכירו, כל שלא בפניו, שאין לחוש שם ירבה בשבילו מותר. Meaning, what is the important parameter? What?
Who will not lachush?
Shein lachush that the goy might do more.
Who will not lachush?
We don't
Me
need to
or the goy?
Oh, ein lachush is the objective truth, right? And that's our Chazal concerned, right? What is the truth? Would someone say, is it feasible to assume that the guy is going to do more of the Melacha because of on the Jew's behalf? So the Magid Mishnah is reading this is Mamash Abaye, right? Even if they're acquainted, but if it's not in his presence, and why is presence important? Shein lachush ham yarbeh. Meaning, the whole problem with acquaintance was that the guy might do more of the Melacha for his behalf, for the Jew's benefit, right? It was when the Breita says, depends on whether they're acquainted, Abaye qualifies that and says, and present. Now, as I said before, what happens if I tell the guy, I'm going to come over tomorrow afternoon for a cup of tea? Right? Boil some water.
Yesh lachush.
So then yesh lachush, right? So then the presence factor doesn't help us enough, right? So, right, the Magid Mishnah continues what Yaakov says, right? It's amazing. We got Magid Mishnah and what Yaakov says. That really these two play off each other, right? The acquaintance and the presence are all leading up to a very simple point, which is he going to do any more of the Melacha for the Jew's behalf? You want to ask a question?
So
Yes.
the question that the Aruch HaShulchan is going to bring up
Okay, let's get to Aruch HaShulchan. Hold on.
is significant because not just because Jews may visit non-Jews on Shabbat,
Mm-hmm.
but we know that Jews employed servants who were not Jewish.
Yes, okay.
And that they clearly are in their presence, they clearly know them, they clearly have significance for them, and it's clearly for the Jews' benefit.
Mm-hmm.
So somewhere along the line, even though we have these criteria that are out there in general, on a practical level, there was clearly the use and productivity of non-Jews on Shabbat that Jews used.
Okay, so the issue of servants we discussed in the previous shir. I'll just say briefly. Previous year we discussed the issue of servants. The question there was, the Rashba says that if the guy is doing a Melacha only for two people, for himself and for the Jew, so always his use and his need will trump the Jew's use and need. Why? Because I'm the most important person in the world, right? Everyone thinks of himself, right? Tarach HaKamocha assumes that everyone loves themselves more than anyone else, right? And then you have to love everyone else almost as much, right? But everyone loves themselves more than they love anyone else. So if the guy does it for himself and the Jew, it'll always be primarily for himself, for his own benefit. And then the Rashba says, unless unless you're in a setting in which the guy is the servant and the Jew is the master, because then as far as the servant is concerned, the primary beneficiary of everything he does, he runs a kitchen, he runs a laundry, he runs all those things he does for his master, right? Obviously. So that's an important point we discussed last week. We're going to see in a moment. And Aruch HaShulchan there, I'll remind us, Aruch HaShulchan there wrote very strongly against opposing this minhag people had. They would tell, it comes dessert time, they'd tell the guy, the servant, they'd say, "Don't you want a cup of coffee?" And the guy says, "Oh, yes I do. Maybe I'll boil a few liters of water." And then on this, you have a few liters of water, so maybe you can use it for our coffee and tea as well. So the Aruch HaShulchan says, obviously and clearly, this is asur, right? You can't do that. That doesn't work. Now, on the other hand, we'll see what does Aruch HaShulchan say that you can do. We see over here, the Aruch HaShulchan goes through Abaye and proves that. I want to take 2 steps back. I started this year with saying the Rashba says there's no real argument between Rava and Abaye. They're just saying different qualifications of the rule, right? Abaye says depends on presence, and Rava says even if he's present, if it's a Melacha that many can benefit from, so all can benefit from. But there's no argument. They both agree that both is mutter. This is the Rashba says. The Rambam didn't quote Abaye, and the question is why not? Aruch HaShulchan, the Seifim Yutet and Kaf, shows basically what we said before, which is, since all 3 of these play on each other, since the acquaintance and the presence and the primary beneficiary of the Melacha are all really within the same realm, so the Rambam doesn't need to explain too much. You can figure it out yourself, and that's why the Rambam doesn't bother mentioning presence, because it's obvious. And then he goes on and says this, and this is a very interesting seif. He says in Seif Kaf Aleph over here, "He'arachti bezeh, lefi shezeh minhag rabim Yisrael sheholchim lemakirehem enam Yehudim b'Shabbat lishtot chamim, vehem mekoravim umakirim zeh et zeh, u'divrei Rabbeinu Beit Yosef Yisur kavdei. לכן באנו, דכיוון דארבעה עמודי עולם התירו זה, יש לנו על מי לסמוך." In other words, Jews would go visit their Goyish friends on Shabbos. It's a cold Shabbos, it's hard to keep the kettle boiled, they don't have our convenient electricity that keeps things stable. So it's a cold Shabbos, they'll go to the guy who lives around the corner and sit down. The guy will say, "Do you want a cup of tea?" I said, "Okay, why not?" Now, so the Beit Yosef says, we don't hold like Abaye. Since the Rambam doesn't quote Abaye, the Beit Yosef says, the Rambam doesn't quote Abaye, so all we have is familiarity, right? We have acquaintance. So if the guy is your acquaintance, you're not allowed to benefit from it. And this qualification of whether you're present or not is not relevant. And therefore it's asur. But says Aruch HaShulchan, as I said, if you Yutet and Kaf, Aruch HaShulchan shows that the Rashba and the Ram and presumably also the Rambam doesn't really argue, because all 3 of these play off each other. So really there's no problem. The Abaye is also right. So if you're not present, it's fine. And therefore, if you go for 4 o'clock tea, right, for all the British, not that many, almost half the British. For all the British around here, you go for your 4 o'clock tea to your guy neighbor who lives around the corner. That's fine, because you weren't present when he boiled the tea. When he boiled the water.
Presuming he boiled the water before you came.
What?
This is all presuming he boiled.
Oh, of course. No, if you're there and he does it on your behalf, of course. But I think Aruch HaShulchan is not talking about a situation in which you told the guy on Friday, tomorrow it's supposed to be cold, I think I'll come around for 4 o'clock tea. Right?
You can't go every week.
If he was right, and you can't go to the same family every week. If this becomes your minhag, he says it's a minhag. So if the minhag is to go to the same guy every week, that should be awesome, because then obviously he's doing it for you. Right? He's adding more to make sure. He says, "Oh, I know they're coming, so I better boil more water." That's a problem. Right? But I think Aruch HaShulchan means, since you're not present, even if you're acquainted, we do accept Abaye, but of course, only if it's not explicitly done for you. Right? That's the first qualification. Well, you go back to, again, to the way we said, the way Yaakov started here, right? That first of all, the question is it done on the Jew's behalf? If the answer is yes, game over. Now, if I don't explicitly know it's done on his behalf, the question is, how does acquaintance and how does presence play into that? But that's a second tier. The first tier is it done on your behalf? If it's done on your behalf, it's asur, and that's it. I just want to point out, right, so, sorry, you want to...
No, it's essentially that whether he knows you or whether you're present are just ways of checking or whether it was done for you.
Right, or taking one step back. We want to give another...
Or if
right, we want to machmir a bit more because maybe
he will do it for you.
Maybe he will do a bit more for you. So it's not only if it's explicitly done for you, it's also if there's a decent svara. But it has to be a decent svara. So if you're not present when it's being done, when it's being made, so and he's not expecting you to come, then it's fine. Right? So I just want to see this in the bigger halacha for a moment, right? So he says both sides, right? So the Ber Halacha goes through this whole mahalach of the question is, does Abaye argue with Rava and is this argument related to Halacha? So the Ber Halacha says, "Be'emet nafkamina b'zeh ledina." True, there's no nafkamina at all. Dafim nifsok hanei rabvat halakel. Alo katav Magen Avraham davka im inu yodea agoy sheYisrael tzarich lo. Yiravach Yisrael lekulam ma'af shelo b'fanav. Dikar tam dema tzarich b'fanav u'kedei sheyeda sheYisrael tzarich v'yarbe b'shvilo. Well, once again, if the guy needs, not only if it's done explicitly for him, if the guy is aware of the Jew's need, it'll always be asur. Even if he's not properly acquainted and if he's not technically present, but he's aware of the Jew's need. So, for example, going back to Rabban Gamliel, he would qualify what Abaye said also, if he has the list of the passengers on the boat and he says, "Oh, Rabban Gamliel, that's important. I want to do a good job here because I want to, I want those people to say, good job that one, right? Whoever built this ramp." That should be asur as well, because there's decent svara that he did it for Rabban Gamliel, right? That would be asur as well. So it goes both ways, right? And then he goes. So then he asks about Rabban Gamliel. How does this work with Rabban Gamliel? That's his next question. So he starts off saying Rabban Magen Avraham seems to be, logically, that's what makes the most sense. Depends on whether it's done for your benefit or not. And everything else is only, right, tangential off that. It's only to take another step back and be a bit more careful with the question of whether it's done for the Jew's benefit or not. But then, how does that work with the Gemara? So he goes back to it. Rabban Magen Avraham niflu mimeni. Da bekevesh Rabban Gamliel, הרי ידע הגוי שצריכים להכבש לרד בו, אפילו אחרי כמה הבית, לפיכך מותרים לרד משום שלא בפניו אסור. Hold on, does the guy not realize that the people on the boat need to disembark?
It's there.
Yes, they can, but...
Yeah,
but you see, you're thinking like a Jew. You're saying, okay, I'm going to Moser Nefesh and stay on the boat. But the guy doesn't see that as a problem. Well, I'll put a ramp up and then they can leave. Of course, they need the ramp. Even if they disembark after Shabbat, they still need the ramp, right? What they'll do with it is another question, but of course he was aware of their need, right? So he says, "V'rak dolai la'anad b'ma sheyeda goy shetzarich Yisrael ino muchach sheyichaven b'shvilo. דעתי הוא לכוון בשביל כל מכריו, רק שיודע שצריך וגם בפניו, נותן דעתו לכוון בשבילו." Meaning, there is logic in requiring both sides. And this is why, this is how he explains Abaye's qualification. Once again, what was the Melacha in the Gemara? The Gemara said there's a story of Rabban Gamliel on the boat. The Goy is acquainted with Rabban Gamliel because everyone knows Rabban Gamliel.
Knows he's on the boat?
Good question. Let's say he does. No, so one way of reading, one way of reading the Gemara is, he wasn't there, meaning he wasn't aware of his existence on the boat, at least, right? But the Bir Halacha says, let's say he was aware of his existence. So what does Abaye's answer mean? It means...
You didn't think about him when you did it.
Right, and that's it. And then that's, for example, my other answer, which would be if Rabban Gamliel stays in his cabin and isn't standing in line to leave it to disembark. So even if he has the list of the passengers, still he's not on his mind. He sees the people who are here and all rushing and want to get off the boat, right? Who's ever been on anyone who's been on a plane has seen this, right? Everyone, right? Tries to get off as soon as they can and get past everyone else, right? So that's you have cabin food, you want to get out of there. So here too, the guy sees the people who are rushing to get off. He doesn't see Rabban Gamliel. He's not on his mind. So you say, but you're aware of his presence. So what? And this I want to take back to Aruch HaShulchan. The guy knows he has Jewish friends in the neighborhood, right? Does that mean that every time he warms up tea for 4 o'clock tea, he's going to warm up for all of his neighbors? Just because they're friends? Because he's aware of their existence?
It's very different.
Why?
Because it's one ramp, but more water is...
That's Rava's answer. I want to not mix those. You're right. The problem with your answer is that it's the Gemara's next answer. Abai presumably said what he said, even if that doesn't. Because Abai, right, Rava said.
Right.
So I'm trying to not use that, right?